Today we are going to be describing the functions of the nervous system, its main divisions, and identify three main types of neurons. We're also going to be taking a look at the functions of the endocrine system and its interaction with the nervous system. So what is the nervous system? The nervous system consists of the central nervous system as well as what is known as the peripheral nervous system. This is our speedy electrochemical communication network that consists of all the nerve cells of the peripheral system and the central nervous system. So what are nerves? As we looked at the neurons in this past mod, they are bundled axons that many neurons communicate through our nervous system to our muscles, our glands, and other sensory organs. There are three types of neurons we've talked about. There are sensory neurons, or also known as afferent neurons. They are the ones that are on our periphery that receive sensory information from the outside world, then communicate to our motor neurons, to our interneurons, which are located in our spinal cord and our brain, then translate to information our brain understands, which then turns around and sends information back through our motor neurons so our body understands what is happening. As you can see in this diagram of touching something that is very hot, sends that from the sensory neuron all the way through our motor neurons to our interneurons and back. How does the nervous system work? So we have our nervous system, which is our composite. Within that, we have what are known as the peripheral nervous system and our central nervous system. The peripheral nervous system is broken down into what is known as our autonomic nervous system and somatic. Our somatic then is responsible for our sensory input and motor output. Our autonomic nervous system is regulated by the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And we'll talk about each one of those as we go forward. Central nervous system is composed of our spinal cord and our brain. This is our decision maker. This is our control center, coordinating incoming sensory information and outgoing motor messages to our body. Our fingers and our toes lie on the outermost area from our center, known as our periphery, and that is our peripheral nervous system. This receives messages and transmits messages to the central nervous system. Within that, we have what are known as the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. This is where our volunteer work is done by choice. So our body, known as our soma, its voluntary actions are controlled by the nervous system. All right, so our somatic nervous system controls our skeletal body, also known as our skeletal nervous system. The autonomic controls glands and muscles in our internal organs. This is where things like our heartbeat, our breathing, our digestion is controlled. We don't have to think about it. It automatically happens. Within that, you have the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system prepares our body for events. This is the arousal. We're getting excited about what's happening. This is the butterflies in our stomach that we have prior to something that's very important to us. This is also a part of the fight, flight, or freeze response. If you will, this is like getting our body and on the go. This is like that gas pedal of a car. The parasympathetic calms us down. It conserves our energy. It gets us rested. It digests. This is the slowing down of that car, the putting on the brakes. The sympathetic and parasympathetic work together, create what is called a homeostasis, a balance, a steady internal state known as the opponent processing. This diagram gives you a glimpse into how our body reacts through the sympathetic nervous system and also the parasympathetic. For example, if you look at when we get aroused, our pupils dilate. When we relax, our pupils contract. Our heart increases or accelerates when our sympathetic nervous system is being aroused, and it slows down as our parasympathetic system begins to calm down. So you can go through all the different glands and so forth and see what is responsible of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. All right, how do the two parts of the central nervous system work together? Our brain is our control structure. This is our cortex and subcortical structures that carry out various functions, arranging neural networks. This is like a grouping of people who move to a city and live together. The spinal cord is that highway in which transmit information to and from our brain, our peripheral nervous system. That oversees the sensory and motor pathways in our reflexes. All right, so an interesting thing to remember about our neural networks is learning occurs through feedback and it strengthens those connections. A nice phrase to remember is that neurons that fire together wire together. All right, so how does a reflex occur? So as our sensory receptors and our skin takes in information, our motor neurons send it to our brain. Those internal neurons in our spinal cord and our brain receive that information and send signals back out to our motor neurons and teaching our body how to move and direct as it does. Again, you may see these types of neurons referred to, for example, sensory neuron as afferent and motor neurons referred to as efferent neurons. This is how our spinal cord goes to work. This is our neural chain. And so this is how a simple reflex occurs to pain. So what does our endocrine system consist of or refer to? This is our communication system for our glands that secrete hormones into our bloodstream. Now remember, they are very similar to the functions of neurotransmitters that our brain produces, but they are produced by our glands. All right, so our nervous system has neurons that release neurotransmitters. Our glands secrete hormones. Neurotransmitters move across synapses where hormones move through our bloodstream. Okay, so neurons occur like a text, very fast, where hormonal secretion is much slower. It's like an email, it takes time. So therefore, hormones are in our body longer. Here are the different glands of our system. Let's take a look first at the adrenal glands, the inner part that triggers our fight or flight response with that sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, producing epinephrine and norepinephrine, which deals with adrenaline and noradrenaline into our body. This increases our heart rate, increases our blood pressure, increases our blood sugar. Our hormones are interested in things like sex, food, aggression. They're similar to neurotransmitters, but as we said, they last longer and produced by different parts of our body. The pituitary gland, this is the one that's also referred to as our master gland. The pituitary gland is in our endocrine system. It is regulated by our hypothalamus in our brain, directs our pituitary gland to regulate growth and control of the endocrine glands. So our pituitary gland is both connected to our central nervous system as well as our hypothalamus. So the way it works is our brain sends messages to our pituitary gland. Our pituitary gland sends messages to the other glands, which secrete hormones, which affect our brain, and it becomes cyclical. The pituitary gland also has what is known as the anterior pituitary gland, which secretes hormones of growth. Like if there's not enough growth hormone, it leads to what is known as dwarfism, or too much is called gigantism. You have the posterior pituitary gland, which produces vasopressin, which leads to the addiction of oxytocin, which constricts our blood vessels, raising our blood pressure, which is this is what induces labor. We also have our thyroid gland. The thyroid gland releases thyroxine, which leads to the growth and maturation. The pancreas secretes insulin, which regulates our sugars. So anyone who has diabetes will know a lot about the pancreas. Our ovaries and testes are our sex hormones or organs that secrete estrogen, for example, in ovaries, which is the female sex characteristics. It promotes ovulation. The testes that secretes androgen, which leads to sperm. This is our male sex characteristics. Testosterone from androgen equals aggression, and that's why boys typically are more aggressive than girls. And that will end Mod 2.